The Clue of the Screeching Owl, a Hardy Boys novel by Franklin W. Dixon. Chapter 1. Puma Charge. "Summer vacation!" Chet Morton exclaimed. "No more school until September." The stout, good-natured boy lounged half asleep between Frank and Joe Hardy in the front seat of a powerful yellow convertible. With a soft purr, the car moved swiftly past the carefully tilled fields of the Pennsylvania Dutch farmers. Dark-haired, 18-year-old Frank Hardy was at the wheel. He kept his eyes upon the highway, which would lead them to the green bulk of the Ponaco Mountains later that sunny June afternoon. Meanwhile, his blonde-haired younger brother Joe said, "There used to be witches around here, Chet. See that sign? It's to ward them off." He pointed to a brightly painted circular design on a huge red barn. Chet Morton had opened his eye as the car moved past the barn. "What is it?" he asked. "A hex sign," Joe told him. "It's supposed to keep off lightning and protect the farm against witches." "Witches!" The plump boy straightened up. Then he looked worried. "Today?" "Sure," Joe Hardy went on teasingly. "If a witch puts a spell on your cow, she won't give milk. Those circles keep off the curse." Nervously, Chet looked around at the next two barns, and at the blue sky above him, and then once all around him. "Oh, nobody believes in that kind of stuff anymore. This is the 20th century. Stop kidding me, will you, fellows? This is vacation. All I'm going to do is sleep and eat. Let's not have any mysteries." While their friend settled down and closed his eyes once more, Frank and Joe exchanged knowing grins. As sons of the internationally famous detective Fenton Hardy, they had many times been drawn into baffling and dangerous mysteries, where their brilliant sleuthing had earned them fine reputations of their own. Easygoing Chet Morton, the Hardys' best friend, always seemed to become involved. "Well, Chet," Frank said, "you may as well know the truth. This isn't just a camping trip. We have to look up an old friend of Dad's, Captain Thomas McGuire. He's living in a cabin at the edge of Black Hollow, somewhere in these mountains just ahead of us." "Captain McGuire?" repeated the stout boy suspiciously. "What kind of a captain is he?" "A police captain. That is, he was the chief of police until 5 or 6 years ago. He's retired now." "I knew it!" Chet exploded. "I just knew it! Another mystery! A fellow no sooner gets set to enjoy a nice quiet vacation than the Hardys drag him into some detective work. When the police and the Hardys get together, it spells trouble. Trouble for old Chet especially. All right, I may as well hear the worst. What is it this time?" "Well," Frank answered, "there have been some funny goings-on around the Black Hollow. Captain McGuire wrote to Dad. He didn't give any details, but asked him to come up and investigate. Unfortunately, Dad couldn't make it." Joe took up the story. "He's been working with the New Jersey State Police, not very far from here, in fact, on this new hijacking racket. Among other things, somebody's been stealing shipments of instruments that go into nose cones of guided missiles. They're taken while being trucked to the assembly station. That's important, all right," Chet agreed. "Dad heard about our camping trip and suggested we take it near Captain McGuire's cabin," Frank finished. "Well, Chet, shall we turn back?" Joe needled. He and Frank knew that underneath his complaints, their friend had plenty of courage and even more curiosity. "I suppose we can't call it off now," Chet mumbled. "All our food would go to waste." It was mid-afternoon when the prosperous valley of the Pennsylvania Dutch, lush with tender green of young crops, had been left behind. The road climbed and curved up a heavily wooded hill. Now and then the thick foliage on either side was broken by a smooth gray rock face. "We're really in the mountains," Joe noted. After topping a ridge, the road descended and then straightened out as it approached the next line of hills. Frank, looking ahead, could see the buildings of a town. Suddenly, the stillness was broken by the sound of music and voices blaring over a loudspeaker. They strained their eyes to see where it came from. "I see it!" Chet shouted. 2 Ferris wheels and a number of tents came into view. A bright, gay banner on top of one read, "Clatch's Carnival." "Woohoo!" Chet shouted eagerly. "Let's go in, fellas. I can smell the popcorn from here." Laughing, Frank parked the convertible, and the 3 boys entered the midway. Now the din of the loudspeakers was overwhelming. Crowds of people moved in both directions. The rides, the whip, and the octopus, and several others whirled madly. The people on them screamed shrilly. Barkers were shouting from the sideshow platforms. Chet immediately bought himself a carton of popcorn, a bag of peanuts, and a frothy cloud of pink cotton candy. "Say, how about this?" Joe asked. He pointed to a sign. Colonel Bill Thunder, Fearless Animal Trainer. The roar of some wild animal, coming from within the tent, was enough to convince the boys of the colonel's courage. In a moment, Frank, Joe, and Chet had entered and taken seats. In the center of a large circular cage stood a man dressed in a white shirt, white riding breeches, and shining black boots. His thick dark hair, mustache, heavy eyebrows, piercing eyes, and the black whip that he held coiled in one hand gave him the look of authority. And he needed it, for seated on small stools at equal distances around the cage were 4 huge cats. 2 were tawny, and 2 were black. All 4 glared at the man, their long tails flicking nervously. "Pumas," Joe whispered to his companions. "Big ones, too." The black whip snapped. The trainer's body rotated as he forced each powerful animal, in turn, to leave its stool and then mount it again. "This fellow's really good," Frank declared. "Notice how his back is fully exposed to one of the cats at all times?" But even as Frank spoke, the snarling black animal upon which the trainer had just turned his back gathered itself and sprang. "He'll be killed!" shrieked Chet, dropping the popcorn, peanuts, and cotton candy to the ground. Warned by the boy's shout, Colonel Thunder whirled to face the charging beast. With a series of lightning-like whip snaps, he drove the snarling cat back into its place. "Terrific!" declared Chet to the man beside him. "He's good, all right," the stranger agreed. "Had another cat that almost got him, though. A big yellow devil. He had to get rid of him finally." Spellbound, the boys watched the rest of Colonel Thunder's act, and then continued on their journey. At the end of the afternoon, 2 hours later, the yellow convertible climbed slowly up a steep dirt road with high dark woods on either side. "I think we're going in the right direction," Frank said, "but we'd better check. There's a house." The bright yellow car came to a stop before a weather-beaten clapboard building with a wooden picket fence in the front. The place was silent. "It seems deserted," Joe commented, looking around. As the 3 approached the gate, however, Frank suddenly pointed to a path along the trees at the side of the house. "Here's somebody." A thin, worried-looking woman emerged from the woods, dragging a boy about 7 years old by the hand. He was crying vigorously. When she saw the Hardys and Chet, she called out, "Hello there, I'm Miss Thompson. Can I help you?" "Yes, thank you," Frank answered. "Is this Rim Road? We're looking for Captain McGuire's place." The woman, who wore a faded but neat cotton dress, came closer and looked intently into the boys' faces. "McGuire? Straight up to the top of the road. He lives in the last house, right there on the edge of Black Hollow." As she answered, Miss Thompson's son gave the boys another searching look. Chet had turned towards the child, who was still weeping. "Poor boy," he said sympathetically. "Mind if I give him a candy bar, Miss Thompson?" "Go ahead. It won't do any good, though. His dog disappeared last night, and nothing anybody can do is going to make him feel any better." "That's a shame," said Chet. "Maybe if we keep an eye out, we'll see it, Miss Thompson. What kind of dog?" "A little brown critter," she answered. "He's got one white ear and a collar and a tag with his name. It's Skippy." "We'll look for him." As the boys turned to go, they heard the woman say sternly, "Bobby, you stop wailing and get on into the house now." And then she called to the boys, "Wait." Surprised, the three turned back. Miss Thompson came to the gate and began to speak in a low, intense voice. "You seem like such nice boys, I just had to tell you something. Don't go near Black Hollow." "But why not, Miss Thompson?" asked Frank. "It's haunted by the hex. A witch, I suppose you'd call her. 200 years ago, there was a pretty young woman around here that got to be a hex. She put spells on dogs and they disappeared and died. And then, by and by, people started to sicken and die too." "But couldn't they do anything about her?" asked Chet with unbelieving eyes. "They tried to. They caught her, and they thought she'd just stop casting her spells. But she stayed scornful and silent. One day she got away and vanished down in the hollow. But at night she used to come up and roam around, and then dry up cows and kill dogs. And at dawn folks would see her going down into the hollow. And then one night came an awful, terrible screaming from the hollow. In the morning, when some brave men went down, there was a great scorched hole in the earth." What happened?" asked Chet. "Folks figured that Satan, the devil himself, came and got that witch and dragged her down to the center of the earth. Then," added the woman, emphasizing her words, "100 years later, dogs started disappearing again. They heard the hex screaming at night in the hollow. Soon it all stopped again. But now listen, boys, another 100 years have gone by, and the dogs are disappearing again. And at night we hear the witch screaming in the Black Hollow." Peering at the trio closely, the woman saw that Chet Morton looked white. But in the eyes of Frank and Joe, there was only a twinkle of amusement and disbelief. Abruptly, the woman shrugged her shoulders. "Don't say I didn't warn you." And with that, she turned and went into the house. End of chapter 1.